Alright, what's up guys? Today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what the pros and cons are of modding your C7 Corvette. You know, there's a lot of goods and bads to doing so. I mean, regardless of what the car's capable of or resale value or, you know, a lot of little things. So let's get into it. I'll start right off with the cons of modding your car in general or your C7 Corvette. With me, I own a Stingray, a base model Stingray. I mean, to me, that I bought it so that it was, you know, the cheaper end, and I had more room to mod versus buying a Z06 for almost twice the price. And, you know, the modability's still there. It's just I could probably do more in mods for the 40 grand I saved. Well, let's get into it. Most people do like a Pro Charger or, you know, an A&A supercharger kit, or, you know, most of the time it's a side mount or top mount supercharger, which just takes less real estate in the engine bay and, you know, forces air into the intake and makes more power. But with a Stingray, the one thing you got to worry about is some of the things, like if your clutch will take the power, if your automatic transmission will take the power, because a lot of times if you have an automatic transmission, you got to add some coolers in there so it doesn't get too hot and start, you know, destroying the valve bodies or the actual torque converter itself. Or with your clutch, the same thing. If you got a clutch that's rated for stock power and you start to put more power into it and it starts slipping and just eating away your clutch, essentially, it's no good. So of course, if you do any type of upgrades, do what a lot of people call supporting mods. You know, make sure your transmission can handle it, make sure your diff can handle it. It's another thing is I opted out of the electronic diff because I felt like a regular gear on gear diff would be stronger and have less things go wrong with it. But let's get into the actual engine itself. The LT1 engine, the direct injected LT1 engine that's in a Stingray, has some weak ringlands. So if you do a supercharger or a turbo kit, it's not necessarily the extra boost that breaks the ringlands. It's pre-detonation. Pre-detonation causes piston rattle, and then piston rattle in turn breaks the ringlands, and then you have pretty much a toast engine, especially if that piston scars up the cylinder wall a lot. Another thing is modding it with an automatic transmission, you can get torque tube issues, and with the torque tube issues and torque converter issues on the automatic, it has been known to destroy the main bearings of your engine. You know, the wobble and the strain of the shake, in a sense, destroys your main bearings. Another thing to watch out for is like oil pressure and, you know, oil temps, the intake air temps. You want to watch all that. So a lot of people use meth injection to cool the cylinder walls. As you know, the best way to say it is a supercharger pretty much enacts friction on the air going into your intake. So that extra friction of, you know, being forced causes a lot more heat, and as it builds up, you get pre-detonation and heat sink of the engine, which is something you just really don't want. Another thing you got to worry about when you mod any type of car, especially a Corvette, is resale value. I mean, if you do a lot of exterior mods or a lot of, you know, internal engine mods or transmission mods or pretty much anything, if you do even interior mods, you add a lot of carbon fiber or a lot of Alcantara or leather. Some people, you know, you might like it, but if you're worried about resale value, you never know what the person buying it wants. Or, I mean, a lot of times, even if I buy a car and I see it's modded, even if I like the mods, I use it in my advantage to get a lower price. I say, well, I got to swap this and that because you changed it. And it can lower your resale value or even put people off of even wanting to buy your car. A lot of people that see a modded car thinks that it's driven harder than a stock car, which necessarily ain't the truth. Especially somebody who mods their car usually cares for their car better. In my opinion, they're the ones that make sure the oil's changed properly, that change out their transmission fluid and diff fluid, regularly, versus someone who buys a stock car and goes, oh, it's stock, I don't have to worry about none of that. So, I mean, you got to think about those cons to doing all these things before you mod your car. And I mean, especially exterior mods. A lot of people do not like wide body kits or, flashy red or blue rims, or, especially if you're cutting the fenders to add a wide body kit. If you have like a Stingray and you do the GS/Z06 wide body kit, it's not so bad, because as long as the person doesn't know better, they probably would just think it's a Grand Sport, or depending on how well you modded the engine, it could look like the Z06. And honestly, if you're dishonest, they probably would never know it. Well, I mean, depending on how well adverse they are into the car world, I mean, you can easily look up the VIN or anything. I know there was on one of my forums, there was a guy who bought a Grand Sport, and he kept bragging about his Grand Sport, but he had a stock Stingray Corvette plaque on the dash. And then, come to find out, he looks up the VIN, and somebody cut apart the car to make it a Grand Sport, which is not necessarily something I would want to do. Or I wouldn't mind doing that to my car because I'm not worried about resale value, but not necessarily would I buy one. I wouldn't buy a Stingray that was turned into a Grand Sport by somebody else, because you never know what they did or how well they did the job. And then you got to think, if they didn't do the job right and they're having issues, that might be why they're selling it. Well, let's get into some of the pros. The pros of like I said earlier, like with the Stingray, if you buy a base model Stingray for $45,000 versus buying a Z06 for even $65,000, you save 20 grand. With 20 grand, you can do a lot of mods. I know there's some companies that make drop-in pistons, drop-in rods for the LT1 engine, and I mean, to be honest, as long as you're not paying a shop to do all your work, you can pull apart your engine, put some rods and pistons in it, get some head and cam work, and your car will be a lot faster than a stock Z06. And if you get proper rods and pistons, it'll be a lot stronger. Then, like I said with the supporting mods, if you get a clutch that can handle, 800, 900 horsepower, and you're only pushing 7 or 8, you should be very good. Because a lot of those things are a little bit underrated for the, an 800 horsepower clutch could most likely take 1,000 horsepower, just depending on the make and certain things, how hard you drive the car. Another thing is when you build your, let's say you build your Stingray or even buy a Grand Sport and you build it and you want it better than a Z06 for the price, you can do a lot of cooling mods, and you can do a lot of things the way you want, a lot better than the factory did. I mean, I know GM's going through some stuff with their overheating issues with the Z06, and they just didn't add enough coolers for what they're doing. I think they should have had a bigger intercooler, or more airflow to the front of the car. It's kind of why the ZR1 looks the way it does, is it's got more coolers in the front. I know it's got a trans cooler, a diff cooler, intercooler, and I mean, it helps with the engine a lot. It helps keep those temps down, and intake air temp spiking is what destroys engines, especially in the LT1s. Another pro for modding is if you're like me, you'll get bored with the power pretty fast. Like, this car was awesome the day I bought it. 3 weeks later, I wanted to buy a supercharger kit, and it just depends if you're one of those people that seek out power on the daily. And of course, to be honest, if you're like that, if you do mod it, it'll be like a constant project. You'll you'll probably never stop modding it. For me, I could push this thing to 700-800 horsepower, love it for 6 months, and then I'd probably want more as long as I could afford it. I always try to think about the more horsepower you put into any car, the more wear and tear you put onto a lot of things, including the chassis. You got to make sure you're not getting crazy chassis flex and you're not destroying the body of the car because of how much power you're putting down. And then you got to think about tires and tire width and just a lot of little things that people wouldn't necessarily factor into modding a car. Most people think that they can throw a supercharger kit and some meth injection onto their Corvette and get 700-800 horsepower and everything will be fine, but then they don't realize that their clutch doesn't handle the power, their transmission necessarily isn't the strongest one, or their tires aren't wide enough and they're breaking loose every 5 minutes. So it becomes an uncontrollable, not fun car to drive because of how much power you put into it. And I mean, I don't know. A lot of people, there's either people that love to mod their car, and there's people that would never mod their Corvette. They would go the route of, just buy a Z06 or buy a ZR1. Why stick with the Stingray? For me, personally, I bought the Stingray, a base model Stingray, because I could mod it. Because I didn't have to care about the warranty. I could, you know what I mean? I could throw the warranty out the window the first mod I do, and it didn't really hurt me. But also, if my engine blows or my transmission blows or I break a diff, I'm not scared to pull my diff or transmission out of my car and fix it myself. That's the difference between, some people versus other people. I also don't mind to tear apart my engine and add rods and pistons if I want to go, to 15, 20 pounds of boost, pushing 800 horsepower or something. You just gotta, you just gotta kind of balance the good with the bad depending on what you want. So, I mean, tell me what you guys think. If you like the video, give me a thumbs up, give me a subscribe. That's it for today, guys. Take it easy.